Okay, sorry about that. So hi everybody, welcome to our spectacular science edition about owls. So I'm Jennifer, your friendly lamb branch librarian, and we have a special guest today, Diana who's the director of the Raptor Center with the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center. And she's going to tell us all about owls and owl pellets. And we have these kits that you'll be able to pick up at most of the library locations. And I know we have at least 14 of these kits left to be picked up at Lamb. So be sure, if you haven't got one yet, to come by and get yours. So now I'll bring up Diana, and she will introduce her owl friend, and she'll tell us all about owls. All right, Diana, take it away.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, I'm Diana, and with me today is my very noisy friend, Piper. Piper is a barn owl, and he is one of our bird of prey ambassadors here at the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center. Now, Piper, he's been with our organization for about 8 years, and he is a really good example of what happens with birds of prey in the wild. Of course, many of them have wonderful lives, and they don't ever need our help. But sometimes birds of prey, as well as other wildlife, get injured. And when they do, they need folks like myself. I'm a wildlife rehabilitator who try to help them recover from injuries or illness and hopefully return them to the wild. And that's always our goal. Piper came to us, and he had been hit by a car on Interstate 25 south of Pueblo. And unfortunately for Piper, he suffered really serious damage to his right wing, this wing right here next to me. He's like, don't be touching me, Diana. Yeah, he's letting us know I'm not supposed to touch him. But anyhow, even though our staff and our veterinarian and Piper worked really hard to try getting him flying again, it just didn't work. So Piper now has a handicap. He can't survive on his own in the wild. So he stays here at the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center. He has a lovely enclosure here at our Raptor Center where he spends his days. And of course, he's a very, very busy educator. He travels all over with us and helps us teach people all about owls. And that's, of course, what Piper and I are here to talk about, is how awesome owls are. Now, lots of people love owls. I know. I talk to people all the time in my job who say, oh, I just love owls. I collect pictures and statues and all kinds of things, all owl. And I'd really like to learn more. So Piper helps us to do that. Owls, of course, are birds of prey, and they belong to a group of animals such as eagles, hawks, falcons, vultures, and owls. And these guys are all grouped together because they're hunters. And they do share things in common. That's why they're in the group together. They all have large eyes, and if Piper, he's a little shy, but you probably noticed from the side view here that he has a very large eyeball. And that's, of course, one way that they can help find their food. They also have a huge set of wings so that they can chase their food. They have very large feet. Let me pick him up here so that you can see him. He has these long, sharp claws, long toes and sharp claws at the end, the talons, and that's going to help him to grab and catch his food. He uses his feet to catch and kill his food. And then all birds of prey have a hook-shaped beak. It's hard to see on Piper, but I'll see if he'll nibble a little bit on my finger so you can see his sharp hook there, so that he can tear his food into pieces he can swallow. But every type of bird of prey, hawks, eagles, owls, they all kind of have a little bit of their own special twist or adaptation to those basic tools. So first of all, for owls, they are all carnivores, and that's true of every bird of prey. They eat other animals, so they have to be able to find that animal again, chase it, catch it, and eat it. So finding, that's the place you start. Now, barn owls love to eat small furry things, and mice, of course, are huge on their menu. They'll also pursue maybe gophers or chipmunks or squirrels. You know, they do also eat birds. They will eat reptiles. So they can eat a lot of different types of very small animals. And to help them do that, they have to be able to find it. So that's where those eyes come in. Now, many owls, not all of them, but many owls do hunt at night. They are nocturnal creatures. So they need to have tools to help them find food at night. So their eyes, Piper, don't be shy. There you go. Let me turn around so you can see his beautiful face. His eyes are very large and they are built to help him see in the dark or low light conditions. Now, many of the animals he hunts, like mice, you know, they're not the most intelligent creatures. However, they do have enough smarts to know that if they're out in the open, just hanging around, that they are easily going to be seen by hunters, by predators, such as a barn owl. So a lot of times those animals, those mice or rats or things, they will travel around their home underneath things. Like maybe they'll run through the grass or maybe under the hay in the barn. Maybe they're under bushes and shrubs, leaves. So any place that can hide them, which makes it difficult for the owl, even though it sees really well at night, to see them. The owl can't always see the prey. So nature kind of gave the owls a really great tool. And I love that Piper's in profile right now because if you look really close, you'll notice all the way around his face, he has this circle pattern of feathers. And actually in a barn owl, their face is like a little heart. So he's got two half hearts around his eyes. So he's got this lovely little pattern of feathers here. And these feathers, the white ones and then the brown ring on the outside, we call that a facial disc. And what it does is it helps Piper to capture sound. Now, you and I, we capture sound by using our ears. We have this flap of skin on the side of our head, and it's nice and curled. It's got lots of grooves in it, and it helps us to capture sound and then funnel the sound into our ear and down into our head where all the rest of the parts of our ear is for listening, the little bones that vibrate, and we can interpret with our brain what those sounds are. So we use our flesh and cartilage to capture sound and funnel. Owls, they don't have an external ear like we do. They don't have an ear flap, but they use their feathers. And it's kind of cool because you probably noticed Piper and I, if you look kind of closely, we kind of have the same shape going on. So he can catch the sound very similar to how I do. And what's really cool on Piper is that the white feathers on the inside of his little disc, they're flat. So when the sound hits Piper's face, it travels up and out to the edge of his facial disc, to that dark ring there. And the feathers in that outer ring, that darker ring of feathers, they're not really straight. They're actually kind of shaped like the letter C. And they create a tunnel that goes all the way around Piper's face, even up his beak, where the feathers in the middle here, you can see they kind of go crisscross across his face. Let me show you there. There we go. They crisscross in there, and they create a tunnel that goes up and around and helps him to carry the sound to his ears, which, just like us, his ears are behind his eyes and on the side of his face, just like us. So they're right back here, just like where ours are. So on Piper, his ear is actually inside that tunnel. So if I were to get in here, let me see if he'll let me scratch. There, I'm scratching. It's kind of hard to see because he keeps turning away. Let me go this direction. Let's do this. There we go. I'm going to scratch. Right there is Piper's ear. He's like, ooh, baby, that feels good. And if Piper's really patient, let me see if he'll let me show you. I can sometimes talk him into, whoops, spreading his feathers apart. Can we do it, Piper? There we go. Did you see his ear? It's right between my fingers. Let me get close. That's his ear opening. Isn't that crazy? He's got that ear right there. So that is his ear opening. Oh, and he cast a pellet. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. That's really, thanks, Piper. On cue. That's perfect. So anyway, the sound travels into his ear, and he can, like us, use that sound to help him locate things. He just does it so much better than we can. Piper, his ear is capable of hearing the tiniest little noises. So Piper could sit up on a tree or in the roof of a barn, because he is a barn owl. They do like to live inside of barns. And he could be listening for the activity of mice down on the floor of the barn or in the leaves on the ground under the tree, and be able to locate the mouse moving around just by the sounds that it's making. He can even hear mice eating. And if you've never heard a mouse eat before, well, all you need to do is take your fingers and just click your fingernails. Hear that clicking noise? Piper does. That's what it sounds like when a mouse is eating. So Piper can use that tiny little click 20, 30 feet away from where he's sitting. He'll hear that. And he can listen so well that he can triangulate on the location of the mouse and then chase after it and capture it without ever seeing it. Owls don't have to see their food to catch it. If they can hear it, they can track it and actually catch it just by listening. So they have a phenomenal set of ears. Now, once you do pinpoint, you have to travel to get there. And of course, that's where the wings come in. I'm going to back Piper up a little bit. Let me see if I can get him just to open his wings for you. Can you just flap for a second, Pi? There you go. You can see his big, beautiful wings. And one thing that is really quite special about owl feathers and owl wings is that when they fly, they don't make a sound. Owl feathers are built or structured to be silent. They're very, very soft. Like if we were to pet Piper, his feathers are so soft. They're just soft as your hair. If you have really soft, silky hair, that's exactly what an owl's feather feels like. They're so soft and silky. And what that does is it lets the air travel very easily over Piper's body when he's flying and not making much noise, because noise is made when you move the air. When you make the air move, that's called turbulence. And the less turbulence you make, the less sound you make. The more turbulence you create, the more wind you're generating with your body, the more noise you create. So owls want to fly without really disturbing the air very much. And that helps them to be silent. So Piper, with his silent wings, he can swoop down, of course, after his prey. And as he comes in, he's usually got his head facing downward because he's listening. He will pause when he gets right above the prey, and then he'll drop down with actually his head first, and then just before he hits the ground, his head comes up and his feet drop down. They slam on top of the rodent, and then his feet close around it, and then off he flies with it to have it for dinner, or maybe to take back to his nest to feed his kids. So they have these amazing set of tools to do their job. Now, barn owls, like their name implies, they do like to live in barns. Barn owls have been around for a long time. And in fact, they were around before humans were actually building a lot of structures. So they knew they used other things, and they still do. They like to nest inside of things. They're cavity nesters. So they will nest inside a hollow in a tree. They might nest in a cave on the edge of a cliff, maybe in an old burrow, maybe a fox made a burrow, or a groundhog. They can use that burrow once it's been abandoned. And if they need to, they actually have enough skill and strength with their toes and legs that if they needed to, in soft soil, maybe along a riverbank, they could actually dig a small tunnel and make a little den inside to raise their young. Now, as humans continued building barns and other structures, they attracted not just their domestic animals like their cows and sheep and things, but also they attracted prey animals like mice and rats and squirrels. And anytime you start attracting prey animals, you get a predator. So as mice moved into barns, barn owls started following the mice into the barns. And when they got in those barns, they said, wow, this is a fabulous place to live. Way up in the top, it's quiet, it's dark, nobody ever comes up here. This is a perfect place for me to hang out and to bring my wife and kids. We can have our nest here. So barn owls have moved into barns. And they're very protective when they're nesting, whether they're nesting in a cavity in a tree, cave in a cliff, who knows, a barn, the hay loft of a barn. While they're there, when they have eggs, and then once the eggs hatch, they have their kids, they are very, very protective. So sometimes if you were to walk in their barn, and they're not used to people coming and going from this space, they are very concerned with us, so they would try to scare us. And to do that, they do make a lot of hissing noises. So they kind of do this, which earlier today he was making a ton of those noises, but he'll hiss. And if you get closer and he doesn't feel, he feels more and more threatened by your presence, the hiss will turn into a scream. And it's a scary scream. It sounds like a silly girl in a scary movie screaming at you from up above. And if you had never heard those noises before or weren't aware of the sounds barn owls make, you might think that you're hearing ghosts screaming from the roof of the barn. And if you get closer and closer and they feel even more afraid, and they're worried for the safety of their children, well, they'll try to scare you off one last time. So what they'll do is they will come streaming down from the top of the barn. They'll swoop down at you. And barn owls from underneath are white. I didn't know if you noticed that. Let me show Piper one more time. Let me back up and see if I can get Pi to kind of open his wings. Can you see that lovely flash of white? He's not flapping very much. It's hot today, so he's not going to flap a lot. But can you see how white he is? So if he were just gliding down from the loft of a barn and screaming as he came at you and then just went right over your head, you might indeed think that you've seen a ghost. And I don't know about you, but if it were me, I would be running in fear because I have no idea what's just attacking me. So a lot of times when people talk about buildings, especially in areas where barn owls live, they talk about haunted houses. Most of the time, if you investigate, there's really no ghost really that lives there. It's just a family of barn owls, and they're protecting their habitat. So they are just a wonderfully intelligent and creative bird to help protect themselves and get them out of harm's way. Now, barn owls, they're unusual. Most owls only have a couple of kids. But in the case of barn owls, they can have very, very big families. Male and female barn owls meet, fall in love, move into a barn, set up a lovely little nest area up in the hay loft, and get business going. Or maybe they use a nest box. That's another way to help barn owls in places where it's very difficult to find nesting cavities. Lots of people put up nest boxes to attract the barn owls because they want them around, because something really important is going to happen when they're going to be eating a whole lot of mice. So mom and dad, barn owls, set up housekeeping. Mom lays her eggs, and instead of laying just 2 or 3 eggs, female barn owls can lay up to 16 eggs at a time. Oh my gosh. Could you imagine having 16 kids all at the same time and try to feed them all? You would need a phenomenal amount of rodents. And that's dad's job. At first, mom, when the babies just start hatching and they're very, very tiny, mom remains in the nest because she has to kind of keep the babies warm. And when dad brings food, she has to tear it up, because birds of prey do have to tear their food up into chunks that they can swallow and feed it to the kids. But as they get a little bit larger and they can keep themselves warm, then she and her mate, they both have to go out and catch mice because they have so many mouths to feed. So on average, Piper, if he were out in the wild, he would have to catch 5 or 6 mice a day to have enough food. And if he had a mate and she was sitting on eggs, he would have to catch 5 mice for him and 5 mice for her. So now he's up to 10 mice a day to feed him and his wife. Now, as the babies start hatching, he's got to catch more. So let's say they have, they have 5 kids. So as those kids grow, they're going to eat, initially they might eat 1 mouse a day, but they grow really fast. And pretty soon they are eating 5 to 10 mice each a day. So these poor pair of barn owls, they're going to have to go hunting and catch maybe 60, 70, or 80 mice a day to feed their family. And you would think with barn owls eating so many mice, that mice would go extinct. We wouldn't have mice anymore. Not to worry. Mice have this figured out. Mice, a female mouse, when she gets married, oh my gosh, mouse, male and female mouse meet, fall in love, set up housekeeping. Mom starts having babies. She has her first litter of pups. They call baby mice, they're called pups. And she nurses them. And right after she's given birth to those pups, you know what? She can get pregnant with her next litter. So while she's taking care of 8 or 10 pups, she is pregnant with her next litter. So 3 weeks after she gave birth to the first batch, they are now old enough to leave home. And then in a day or so, she gives birth to the second batch. And in 3 weeks, yeah, they're going to be old enough to leave home, and she's going to give birth a couple days later. You got it, to her third batch. And that's go on and on. A female mouse can have babies every 3 weeks. And by the time her babies are 2 to 3 months old, her first litter, when they're 2 to 3 months old, guess what? They are old enough to start having babies of their own. So very quickly, if you love to do math, that's a great math problem. How many babies could one pair of mice, with all the resources they need, produce in a year? It's an amazing math problem to try sometime. So we really need animals, predators like barn owls and snakes and hawks and things like that, to help us control those populations. Because if there weren't guys around like this eating mice, there probably wouldn't be much for any of us to eat. So they're just these amazing, wonderful creatures. Well, I got a couple of things that I want to show you. So I'm going to let Piper go ahead and go back to his crate where he's resting. So I'll be right back. Don't wander off too far. I'm not going too far. I'm just going to wander over here. Piper has his crate. He's going to hop right in for me, because I got a couple of things I want to show you before I have to go today. What I was talking about is feathers. So, oh, there you are. I lost you for a second. I have 2 feathers that I pulled out. We keep, when we collect feathers when the birds shed them or molt them. So this first one, this is a hawk feather. And I wanted to show it to you because I wanted you to see, I know it's kind of hard to see on video, but I want you to notice how kind of smooth and sharp the edges of the feather are. And this is from a hawk. And hawk feathers have these really fine, sharp edges because when they fly, they want to go fast. And if you're going to go fast, that means you have to move the air a lot, create turbulence, and you create noise. So this is a feather, the hawk feather. This is a feather for fast flight because it's sharp and the edges fit that. It's a little bit different. If you look here at the edge, let me see if I can get close to the camera. It's sort of kind of looks like it's got a little very fine comb on the edge of it here. There we go. Here's a nice picture. There's the comb there. It's a little bit in the sunlight. Sun's moving on me. But yeah, and then down here on the bottom, it looks very frayed or fringed. And it's that little difference in their feathers that helps to make them silent. So if you're curious how that works, you could do an experiment to show you the difference. And all you need to do is take your hand and you want to spread your arm out with your hand flat and back. And what you're going to do is your fingers and your arm is going to be your wing. So what you're going to want to do is to be a hawk, you're going to put your fingers together very tight. Try to keep your wrist fairly stiff and then just flap for a second. And if you do it, you should hear some air moving. Now, owls, when they fly, their feather edges separate. So now you're going to separate your fingers like this, and then you're going to put your hand back, but this time you're going to flap. difference. Isn't that interesting? How just the change in the edges of your fingers by separating them or making them solid changes the airflow between the two positions of your hand. And that's exactly how feathers work on an owl. And of course, it gets real complicated from there, but that's the basic essence of owl feathers. They're soft and fluffy, kind of frayed and fringed, and they help the owl to fly silent. Now, getting back to what Piper did a little bit ago when he spit up that little ball, what that was, you grab one here, was, whoops, I got it, there we go, is a pellet. This is a pellet. And actually, this is one of Piper's pellets. This is not the one that he just coughed up or cast. This is one that he cast a couple of days ago and has dried out. And what happens? Why is there a pellet? Well, that's what people ask all the time. What is this? Is this his poop? No, it's not his poop. What happens is when a bird of prey eats an animal, they actually, if it's small enough, will eat the whole entire animal. Ate it. What happened is he didn't sit there and carefully peel back the skin and just eat the meat off the bones. No, no. He started at the head and he literally just tore the head into chunks and worked his way down the body until he was full, which means he ate fur, bones, teeth, toenails, eyeballs, heart, liver, lungs, brain, you name it, it went in. Now, why does he eat all that? He has to. Birds of prey are carnivores, which means they have to get all the nutrients for a healthy body from the food they eat. And in that case, they just eat animals. You and I are different. We are omnivores. We eat both plants and animals. So we get the nutrients or the good stuff to keep our bodies healthy from two sources. So for example, you and I want to eat something healthy for our eyeballs. We eat a carrot. Piper, the barn owl, he has eyeballs. He has to keep them healthy. He's not going to eat a carrot, though. He can't. He can't even digest a carrot if he did eat it. So what's he going to eat instead? Oh, yeah, eyeballs. You got it. Skeleton for our bones. We use humans. We use dairy products. Some certain vegetables have a lot of calcium that's good for our bones and our teeth. Piper, if he wants some calcium, if he wants to get good stuff for his bones, he is not going to have a glass of milk. He's definitely not having yogurt for lunch, and he never gets to eat ice cream. Instead, yeah, he's going to eat bones. You got it. So he's eating all the different parts of a body to get good stuff. So for his skin, he eats somebody else's skin. For his heart, he eats somebody else's heart. For his brain, yeah, he eats other animals' brains. And that's how he gets his nutrition. Now, not everything, though, that he swallows can be completely digested. Things like bones, fur, feathers, claws, teeth. Maybe he picks up some vegetable, maybe some plant material because he's eating on the ground or a rock. Those items cannot be completely broken down. And actually, everything that you eat doesn't get completely broken down either, because you probably noticed you make waste just like a bird does. They have to go to the bathroom sometimes. And we typically, just like a bird, have two types of waste, liquid and solid, or number one and number two. And anyhow, but he has 1 and 2, but he also has 3. And 3 is the pellet. What happens is if I were with you guys live in person and I had a box of chocolate covered mice and I passed them out, as you bit off the head of that chocolate covered mouse, would you just start to swallow it immediately? No, you chew it, right? You would chew up the head of that mouse and crush the bones in the skull into very, very tiny little pieces, and then you'd swallow it. But what you've done is by chewing, you are breaking food down into small enough pieces that whether you can digest it or not, it can pass completely through your digestive system. Hawks, owls, falcons, they don't do that. If they swallow the entire head, which they will do, Piper, his mouth is big enough, he can swallow a mouse whole. So that means the whole entire skull intact is in his stomach. He can't break down that bone. So he's got these big bones just floating around in his stomach. Everything else is being broken down by the acids, kind of turned into this mush. And at some point, the stomach will start to kind of constricts. It's a powerful muscle, and it'll start to push that food out into the intestines. But the bigger items, the bones, the fur, the teeth, the toenails, the plant life, whatever that's too big, stays in the stomach. And then the stomach keeps squeezing until it forms the ball, the pellet. And once that pellet's formed, the bird does exactly what Skylar did at the beginning. He regurgitates it, or as we say, he casts his pellet. That's such an elegant way of saying he pukes his pellet. He casts it. And when they come out, I will admit, it's sitting on the ground by my shoe right now. It's very gross and slimy because it's covered in mucus from coming back up his esophagus. But we'll let it dry out in the sun, and in a couple of days, we'll have this really cool, dry pellet that is really fun to take apart. And the library has kits. If you haven't picked one up already, you want to get them before they're gone, because pellets are really fun to take apart. Because all it is basically, it's not poop or anything. It's actually pretty clean because it's been in the owl's stomach and there's lots of acid in there. So it's actually pretty good. But there's also gloves. You can wear gloves if you want to. But what's really cool is you start to tear it apart. I'm going to break it. It's just basically a fur ball filled with bones. Oh, yeah, there we go. I don't know, can you see the bones in there? Let me pull one up. Oh, here we go. Let me get it between my fingers. There we go. There's this little tiny mouse bone. Oh my gosh, there's a little tiny bone. And the more you pull apart, the more that you find. So I've got tons. I'm just going to see if I have, here we go. I've got another little, here's a leg bone. Look at that tiny little leg bone. It's so cute. There we go. Little leg bone. You'll find ribs. You'll find little itty bitty teeth, claws, tailbones. Oh my gosh. It's so fun to take them apart. And it's a great way to learn about what birds are eating, because the shape of the bones can help you to identify what kind of animal it is. And so it's really kind of fun, especially if you have birds that are coming in from the wild. And you can really kind of see what those guys are eating. It really helps not only to learn what they're eating, but what's living in that area. So if you want to do some research on an animal that lives in your neighborhood, what you do is, if you have a hawk or another bird of prey that lives in your neighborhood and you see it on the same perch, maybe he's up on a power pole or he likes to sit on a shed or a roof somewhere. When he's not there, go explore around the area below where he sits, because sometimes you will find pellets. And then, put on some gloves for safety and tear those pellets apart and see what he's been eating. We do that here at the center. If a wild bird comes in injured and he casts a pellet, we tear them apart. And or you're out walking and maybe where the owls hang out, and it's just fun to go see what they've been eating. And it's just really cool to learn. I found some interesting things in pellets. I found a rattlesnake rattle in a pellet one time. So that owl must have been eating rattlesnakes. I found a jaw from a skunk in a pellet. I found the exoskeleton, the outer shell of a crayfish in a pellet. So we learn a lot about what birds of prey are eating from the animals that they eat. Well, I hope that you guys have enjoyed learning about owls today and meeting Piper. We're so excited to be invited to the library so we could meet you. We hope someday you'll come and visit us at the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center. If you want to visit, just give us a call and we can set up a visit for you and your family if you would like. And of course, visit the library. There are wonderful books there, lots of information on birds of prey and all kinds of critters that you can find out and about. So thank you guys for listening. And I don't know if there's any questions from anybody, but I'm happy to hang on for a little while and ask those. Jennifer, back to you.
All right. Thanks, Diana and Piper, for sharing some great information and visiting us with us today. And as Diana mentioned, and I said before, we have kits at the library where you get to dissect an owl pellet. And they look like this. They come in wrapped in foil. They look like a little baked potato, but it's definitely not a baked potato. And these have been treated with dry heat, so they are sterile, but we also have included some gloves. It's still a good idea to use gloves, and a lot of people prefer. They're a little messy sometimes with all the fur, so if it's not too windy outside, I recommend doing it outside. That's when I did mine, because your grown-ups might not like fur and feathers all over the house. We still have, like I said, we still have at least a dozen or so kits here at Lamb. I know some of the locations are already out of them, but if you haven't picked one up yet, check around and see who still has some. And I've done this project before, and kids really love it. It's a little gross, but not real gross. As Diana mentioned, the pellets are dried. They're not fresh and slimy. They don't stink or anything like that. So it is really cool and interesting. So I highly recommend this activity. And if you haven't turned in your reading pays completion form, you need to get those in. If you were registered in June and you didn't get yours in, we have rolled you over into July, so you get another chance. You get till the end of the July to get it turned in. And if you need help submitting those, just come by the library and we'll be happy to help you and accept any hard copies you have to turn in. And so I hope you enjoyed our presentation and learned a lot about owls. So until next time, enjoy a good book and learn something new. So